I was 36 years old when everything I had worked for, every hour of overtime, every deal, every ounce of my self-worth was ripped away with a single sentence: "We're letting you go." Even now when I say it out loud, it doesn't sound real. But that's how it happened. I was standing in my boss's glass office, the skyline of Chicago stretching out behind him like a stage set, and I remember thinking he couldn't possibly mean me. Not after all I'd done. Not after the deal I'd just closed. My name is Cassandra Doyle, and for nearly a decade I was one of the top sales executives at Brooks & Hale Real Estate Group, one of the most cutthroat firms in the Midwest. I started there in my mid-20s, back when I still believed hard work guaranteed success. I was ambitious, loyal, and maybe a little naive. I stayed late, took calls on holidays, made my life revolve around closing deals and hitting numbers. And in that world where reputation meant everything, I built mine with blood and sweat. By the time I was 36, I had become the person people came to when they needed a miracle. The woman who could sell anything: a half-finished skyscraper, a dream wrapped in blueprints, a future not yet built. Clients trusted me because I didn't just sell them properties, I sold them possibilities. I made them believe. That's what made what happened next so cruel. It was a Thursday morning in March, the end of the fiscal quarter, and I had just finalized a $2 million commercial deal that had taken me 7 months to land. 7 months of courting the client, building trust, solving problems no one else in the company could. It wasn't just any deal, it was my career's crown jewel. That morning I walked into the office knowing that contract meant not only recognition, but also the commission I'd been dreaming about. It would have changed my life. For years I'd told myself that one big win would finally justify all the sleepless nights, all the birthdays I'd missed, all the relationships that fell apart while I chased success. When I walked past my coworkers' desks, they looked up, some smiled politely, others whispered. I assumed they'd heard about the deal. I even smiled back, thinking maybe for once they were happy for me. But as I stepped into my office, I noticed something odd. My computer was logged out. The nameplate on my desk was missing. My stomach tightened, and before I could make sense of it, Mark Hale, the co-founder and my direct superior, appeared in the doorway holding a thin manila folder. "Cass," he said, his tone unnervingly calm. "Got a minute?" It wasn't really a question. I followed him into his office, still clutching my coffee cup, like it might anchor me to reality. The blinds were half drawn, muting the sunlight into thin stripes across the floor. I noticed his assistant wasn't at her desk. It was too quiet. He gestured for me to sit. Then he said it flat, almost rehearsed. "We're letting you go, effective immediately." I blinked. "What?" "It's not personal," he said, sliding the folder toward me. "The company's restructuring. Your position is being eliminated." I stared at him, trying to process his words. Eliminated, Mark? I just closed a $2 million deal. You can't be serious. He leaned back, folding his hands behind his head, the same posture he used in meetings when he wanted to look relaxed while dropping bad news. "The deal's great," he said casually. "But technically it was finalized under the company's name, not yours. The client relationship will stay with Brooks & Hale. You'll get your standard severance package." That's when I realized it wasn't just a layoff, it was a setup. He waited until I closed the biggest deal of my career, until the company stood to make millions, and then he fired me before the commission cleared. I felt my throat tighten. "You planned this," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. Just smiled, that polite, infuriating smile. "Sometimes business gets messy. You'll land on your feet. You're talented, Cass." I remember looking at him and thinking how many hours I'd spent defending him to others, how many times I'd told myself he was tough but fair. I wanted to scream, to throw something to make him see what he was taking from me. But all I could do was sit there frozen, watching the man I'd built my career under erase me like I was nothing. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely a whisper. That commission was mine. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Legally, no. You weren't under contract at the time it cleared. HR will walk you through the details." He walked me out like he was doing me a favor. People watched from their desks, pretending not to. My friend Jenna mouthed what's happening, but I couldn't even look at her. That was how 10 years of loyalty ended, with a folder, a fake apology, and a security escort to the elevator. I didn't cry until I got to my car. The first tear hit the steering wheel, and then they just kept coming, a flood I couldn't stop. It wasn't just about losing the money. It was the betrayal, the humiliation, the realization that I'd spent years serving a company that would gut me the second it was convenient. I drove aimlessly for hours past the city limits until I found myself parked at the edge of Lake Michigan. The water was still half frozen, the waves dark and sluggish under the gray sky. I sat there until sunset, replaying everything in my mind, every meeting, every late night, every moment I thought I mattered. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept hearing his voice. Sometimes business gets messy. Messy, that was the word he used for ruining someone's life. By morning, the grief had hardened into something else, something sharper. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make one call. There was only one person who could help me now, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Ethan Cross, a former client, and once someone I trusted more than I should have. Ethan had been my biggest account before he left the corporate world to start his own development firm. We'd shared a mutual respect, and something that almost became more. He was smart, methodical, and the kind of man who never forgot loyalty. When I called, I didn't know what to expect, but the moment he answered, his voice was the same calm, direct, and a little too perceptive. "Cass," he said, "it's been a long time." I hesitated. I wouldn't call if it wasn't important. He was silent for a moment, then said, "What did they do to you?" That question broke something inside me. Because he didn't say what happened, he said, "What did they do?" Like he already knew. I told him everything, how Mark fired me, how they stole my deal, how I was left with nothing. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a long pause. "Send me the client's file," he said finally. "Every email, every note, every signed document you have." I frowned. "Ethan, I don't even have access to." He cut me off. "Cass, you always kept backups. You're too smart not to." He was right. Somewhere deep down, I had kept copies of everything, not because I expected this, but because I'd learned early in my career that trust doesn't mean ignorance. That night, I went through my old drives, my emails, my notes, and as I did, I started to see patterns I hadn't before. Little things I'd ignored: side conversations, changes in contract drafts, revised terms that somehow benefited the firm more than the client. And as I pieced it together, I realized something even darker. Mark hadn't just stolen my commission. He had been using my work to cover his own fraudulent deals. I sat there staring at the documents, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice. I didn't sleep that night. My mind wouldn't stop racing, every email, every contract clause, every coincidence from the past 6 months replayed like a jigsaw puzzle, suddenly forming a picture I was never meant to see. The truth was right there, hidden in the fine print and the digital trails I'd left behind without realizing their weight. Mark Hale hadn't just fired me to avoid paying my commission. He'd fired me to bury evidence. For years, I'd managed his biggest clients. He always insisted on handling final signatures himself, said it was about client relationships, about optics. I never questioned it because I trusted him. But as I compared the copies I'd saved against the versions filed in the company system, something didn't add up. My contracts had clean terms, my clients had clarity, but the finalized versions had subtle differences. An extra clause here, a delayed payment term there, adjusted ownership credits that funneled small percentages to shell accounts. He'd been using my credibility, my name, to mask embezzlement disguised as corporate restructuring. When I called Ethan the next morning, my voice trembled from equal parts exhaustion and fury. "Ethan, you were right," I said. "He's been laundering money through client accounts using my deals as cover." There was silence on the line, then his steady reply, "Then we make him answer for it." It was strange hearing that level of calm. Ethan was never one for drama. He was surgical, deliberate. And in that moment, I realized I didn't just need his help. I needed his precision. He asked me to come to his office, a sleek building downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place that smelled like quiet power. As I stepped into his corner office, the city stretched out below us, and for a moment I felt small, a woman standing on the edge of her own reckoning. Ethan gestured for me to sit. "Tell me everything," he said. So I did. From the day I closed the $2 million deal to the exact moment Mark's assistant escorted me out of the building. He listened carefully, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad, his brow furrowed in thought. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline. "He's clever," Ethan said finally. "He didn't just steal your commission, he turned your work into a shield. If this goes public, he'll spin it as a misunderstanding. You'll look like a disgruntled ex-employee unless we have hard evidence." "I have some," I said, "but not enough." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll get the rest." Over the next 2 weeks, Ethan and I became a quiet storm. He had contacts, legal analysts, forensic accountants, people who knew how to trace digital footprints without setting off alarms. Every night after work, I'd meet him in his office or over encrypted calls. We pored over files, reconstructed client histories, matched signatures, and timestamps. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Mark had been siphoning profits from at least 5 major deals, rerouting funds into offshore entities under fake consultant names. He'd even used my credentials to authorize 2 of those transfers, which meant if anyone looked closely, I would take the fall. One night, after hours of staring at spreadsheets and fake invoices, I buried my face in my hands. "He's ruined me," I whispered. "Even if we prove he did this, no one will believe me. I'm the one whose name is on everything." Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but unwavering. "Then we don't just expose him. We dismantle him the right way. Publicly, legally, irreversibly." Something about the way he said it made me believe again. For the first time since losing my job, I felt like I had ground beneath my feet. But to make it work, we needed leverage, something that would tie Mark directly to the crime, something undeniable. That's when I remembered Rachel. Rachel was Mark's former executive assistant, sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. Until she wasn't. She had left the company a few months before I was fired, citing personal reasons. But I remembered the day she left. She hugged me in the break room, eyes glossy, and whispered, "Be careful, Cass. He's not who you think he is." At the time, I'd brushed it off. Now it felt like a warning I'd ignored too long. I tracked her down through LinkedIn, sent a brief message. "Hi, Rachel. It's Cass. I really need to talk. It's about Mark and what happened at Brooks and Hale." She replied within the hour, "Meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m., Café La Rue. No texts, no calls." The next morning, I sat across from her in a quiet corner booth. Time had changed her softer around the edges, but her eyes still carried that sharpness I remembered. "You're not the first person he's done this to," she said quietly, stirring her coffee. "You're just the first who might actually be able to prove it." She slid a small flash drive across the table. I backed up everything before I left. Emails, voice memos, internal reports. "He made me send fake invoices under your name, Cass. I couldn't keep doing it." My throat tightened. "You had this the whole time." "I was scared," she admitted. "He threatened to blacklist me. But when I saw your name in the news, the way they made you look like some greedy exec, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." I took the drive, my hands shaking. "Rachel, this could save me." She smiled sadly. "No, it's going to destroy him." When I got back to Ethan's office and plugged in the drive, it was like watching a noose tighten. There were voice recordings, Mark dictating emails, bragging about how he timed my termination perfectly. "She thinks she's smart," his voice said, half laughing. "But she's just another piece on the board. She'll never see it coming." Hearing it felt like a punch to the chest. All those years I'd given him my trust, my loyalty reduced to a game. Ethan listened beside me, his jaw clenched. "This is it," he said. "This is everything. We didn't rush. We built a case, quietly, methodically." Ethan's legal team drafted the reports. Rachel's files were authenticated by a forensic lab. Every email, every transaction, every recording was verified. Within weeks, we had a bulletproof package enough to trigger an investigation, freeze accounts, and expose the entire fraud network. But there was one last decision to make: how to release it. Ethan's first instinct was to hand it over to the authorities, but I hesitated. "No," I said. "He fired me in public. He humiliated me in front of everyone. I want the truth to come out the same way." Ethan studied me, then nodded slowly. "You want to do this your way." And so we planned it. Brooks and Hale held a quarterly investor meeting every May, a live-streamed event where executives flaunted their numbers to shareholders and the press. Mark would be front and center, taking credit for my deal, smiling that smug smile as if he'd built the empire himself. That would be the moment. I wasn't looking for applause. I wasn't looking for revenge in the way people imagine it, wild, chaotic, fueled by rage. What I wanted was truth, the kind that shatters lies and leaves no room for spin. Ethan arranged the press access. Rachel confirmed the broadcast feed, and I prepared my statement not as the victim, but as the woman who refused to disappear quietly. When the day came, I stood in the back of the grand conference hall, hidden among investors. The air was thick with perfume and ego. Mark was at the podium talking about integrity, teamwork, and vision. I almost laughed. Then Ethan gave me the signal. Rachel, sitting at the AV console, pressed a button and the room fell silent as Mark's own voice began to echo through the speakers. She thinks she's smart, but she's just another piece on the board. She'll never see it coming. Every head turned toward him, his smile faltered, eyes darting wildly. Then the screens behind him lit up, showing slides of the fraudulent invoices, offshore transfers, forged signatures. Chaos erupted. Mark stammered, tried to talk over the audio, but the evidence kept rolling. The shareholders, the board, the press, all watching as his carefully constructed empire collapsed in real time. I stood there, heart pounding, watching the man who'd taken everything from me finally see himself for what he was, exposed, cornered, undone by his own arrogance. When the lights came back on, the room was dead silent. And for the first time in years, I felt free. Security rushed in first. Then the board members' faces, pale voices raised in disbelief, surrounded Mark like vultures that had suddenly realized the carcass in front of them was one of their own. He tried to shout over them, waving his hands, stammering about misunderstandings and doctored evidence, but it was too late. The damage was irreversible. His voice had already been played, his lies already seen. The cameras kept rolling. The press was still there. The broadcast, as Rachel had confirmed, was live. Millions were watching. I remember standing still in the back of that conference hall, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the surreal realization that it was over. The humiliation, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, replaying every cruel detail, they all ended in that moment. I had spent months breaking under the weight of what he'd done to me, and now I was watching him crumble under the truth. The board chair, a woman named Elaine Peterson, took the microphone once the chaos quieted. Her expression was grim, her tone sharp. "This company does not tolerate fraud," she said, her voice echoing across the hall. "Effective immediately, Mark Hale is suspended pending full investigation. Legal authorities will be notified." Mark's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but two security officers were already guiding him toward the exit. His eyes swept across the room, desperate, angry, until they found me. Our gaze locked. For a fleeting second I saw recognition, then disbelief, and then finally fear. He mouthed something I couldn't hear, maybe my name, maybe a curse, but I didn't care. I didn't owe him my attention anymore. Ethan touched my arm lightly. "You did it," he whispered. But the truth was, I didn't feel triumphant, not yet. Just still, numb, like I had been waiting to exhale for too long. When we stepped outside into the spring sunlight, reporters swarmed the entrance. Questions flew like arrows. "Did you know about the investigation? Were you aware of the whistleblower? Was Cassandra Doyle involved?" Ethan shielded me as best he could, guiding me toward his car. "Let it play out," he murmured. "You don't owe them anything." But I knew I couldn't hide forever, not from the story that was already spreading like wildfire. Within hours, headlines appeared online. "Real estate executive exposed in $12 million fraud scandal. Whistleblower reveals inside corruption at Brooks and Hale." And buried within the details in one quiet paragraph was my name. Sources confirm former employee Cassandra Doyle provided key evidence leading to the exposure. My phone exploded with messages. Former colleagues, reporters, even old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Some wanted interviews, others just wanted gossip. But the one that mattered most came from a name I hadn't expected: Jenna. "Cass, I'm sorry. I didn't know what he did to you. I should have believed you." I read it twice before replying simply, "I know, none of us did." For days, the story dominated business news. The company's shares plummeted. Regulators launched an official investigation, and Mark's lawyer released a pitiful statement denying everything. But the recordings, the documents, the bank trails, they were undeniable. Justice was finally catching up to him. Yet even in victory, I couldn't shake the heaviness in my chest. One night, as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city, I realized something: revenge doesn't heal you. It doesn't erase the betrayal or the memories of people whispering behind your back. It only gives you back your voice. And sometimes that's enough. Ethan stopped by a few days later with a bottle of wine. He smiled as he handed me a folder. "Settlement papers," he said. Brooks and Hale wants to settle with you privately before the lawsuit gets messy. They're offering a public apology plus full commission on your deal with interest. I stared at the folder speechless. You're serious? He nodded. They're terrified of more exposure. You've already won, Cass. Take it. But I didn't open it right away. I just looked at him, this man who had stood by me when everyone else walked away. Why did you help me? I asked softly. He smiled faintly. Because you helped me once. You believed in my project when no one else did. And because you didn't deserve what he did to you. Something about the way he said it made me look away, afraid of what I might see in his eyes. Gratitude, admiration, maybe something more. But my heart was too tired to trust anything yet. I didn't sign the papers that night. Instead, I poured 2 glasses of wine, and we sat on my balcony overlooking the city. 2 people who had seen how ugly the world could get, finding a little peace in the wreckage. Over the next few weeks, my life slowly began to piece itself back together. The media storm quieted. The company restructured under new leadership. Rachel got a job offer from one of Ethan's partners, a fresh start. And me, I started consulting independently. No bosses, no glass offices, just me, my clients, and the freedom to choose who I worked for. The first time I walked into a boardroom again, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: control. I looked around at the polished table, the sharp suits, the confident faces waiting for my presentation, and I realized I wasn't the same woman who had once begged for approval. I was the woman who had taken everything they tried to destroy and turned it into something stronger. But the closure I didn't expect came weeks later in an envelope left at my door. No return address. Just my name written in hurried ink. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a letter. Cassandra, I never meant for it to go that far. I thought I could control it. I thought I could control everything. But I lost everything instead. I know you'll never forgive me. I just needed you to know. I respected you even when I hurt you. Mark. I read it twice, then folded it neatly back into the envelope. I didn't feel satisfaction or pity, just peace. Because that letter wasn't an apology. It was an admission, the final piece of truth I needed. I walked to the lake, the same place I'd sat the night after he fired me, and watched the waves roll against the shore. The water looked different now, calmer, reflective. The woman I was back then had been broken, but the woman standing there now, she was whole. I whispered into the wind, "You can't bury the truth forever." The world didn't answer, but the stillness felt like closure. That's when I finally let it all go. The anger, the pain, the years of giving my loyalty to people who didn't deserve it. I walked away from the lake that evening, knowing one thing for certain: karma always comes not when you want it to, but when it's ready. And sometimes it uses you to deliver it. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever been betrayed, silenced, or underestimated, I want you to know your truth will always find its way out. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will. So don't give up. Don't let them write your ending for you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell me in the comments what your moment of truth was. I'd love to hear it.